Hey, you. You're finally awake.
G'day Smut Squad and welcome back to the channel. The Game Gear was Sega's console that could have been. Whilst it did have the potential to fight off Nintendo's Game Boy, you essentially needed to get a bank loan to buy enough batteries to run the bloody thing. As well as the bank loan needed for the batteries, you also had to deal with some terrible games. So today we're going to be looking at more bad Game Gear games. And as always, if you think there's ones I need to talk about, put them in the comments below, because we can always do more videos. And as always, if you do think I deserve it, please hit that like and hype button, because that is what helps the channel grow and takes this from a little hobby of mine to hopefully my full-time career. You can subscribe and hit the notification bell to be told when new videos are coming out. We've also got the weekly podcast and we're nearly at episode 200, and you can also join the Freeze Discord and the link is in the description below. Right, let's get into it, shall we? More terrible Game Gear games. Tails Sky Patrol. Yeah, it's a Sonic game. Ish. Tails Sky Patrol pushed the Game Gear to the limit of a player's patience. It was a spin-off that took one of the game's most beloved sidekicks and trapped him in an experimental, flying-only shooter that fundamentally misunderstood what makes a handheld game fun. It didn't just fail that Sonic brand, it failed the basic laws of physics and real estate. I should also make this very clear, ignore the fact that this video makes the game look easy. It ain't. Tails is flying solo to save an island from a witch named Wendy Witchcraft, no Sonic in sight. Unlike any other Sonic game, Tails is constantly flying. He carries a gold ring that acts as a grappling hook to grab items, hit switches and defeat enemies. And it's an auto-scroller. The screen moves forward at a set pace, and if Tails touches a wall or an obstacle, he immediately loses a life, and there's no rings to protect you here. That doesn't make sense. Tails Sky Patrol is a masterclass in mechanical friction. It takes a simple concept that makes every second feel like a chore. The Game Gear is famous for its motion blur and small screen. In an auto-scroller where touching anything results in instant death, you need precision. And because the screen is so zoomed in on Tails, you have often less than a second to react to an obstacle appearing from the right. It's a game memorization, not skill, played on a screen that smears like wet paint. And Tails doesn't just fly, he has a fuel gauge. To stay in the air you have to constantly collect mini candies. That makes no sense. If your meter runs out, you'll fall and die. This adds a layer of resource management to a game that is already struggling with its own controls, turning every level into a stressful, beat-filled panic attack. Tails' only weapon, though, is the ring he carries. You throw it to interact with the world, but the arc of the throw is awkward and slow. And because Tails is always moving forward, trying to aim at a switch or an enemy requires landing your shot perfectly, but if you miss, you usually crash into the very thing you were trying to hit. It's like trying to play darts while riding a unicycle down a hallway. Now in a standard Sonic game, hitting a wall just stops your momentum. In Sky Patrol, the walls are made of lava and hatred. If Tails' ear so much as grazes a ceiling tile, he explodes. There's no mercy, invincibility or health system. For a game aimed at the younger fans of the cute sidekick, it's punishingly unfairly difficult. And despite the Sky Patrol name, the environments are mostly dull caves and corridors. The Game Gear was capable of vibrant colours as seen in Sonic Triple Trouble, but Sky Patrol feels visually stagnant. The levels feel like they go on forever because the gameplay loop never changes. Fly, grab a candy, throw the ring, don't touch the wall, repeat until you lose your mind or throw the console out the window and possibly hit an old woman. The music is also a collection of high-pitched chirpy tunes that get old in the first 30 seconds. Combined with the constant low fuel beeping and the sound of Tails' ring clanging against walls, it's a sensory assault that makes you turn the volume dial to 0. Tails Sky Patrol is a textbook example of the B-Team spin-off. It took a high-speed mascot and put him in a slow, clunky, unforgiving box. It represents a time when companies were throwing any idea at the wall to see what stuck, and unfortunately for Tails, this was one that fell flat on its face. It's a curiosity for collectors, but a nightmare for anyone actually trying to have fun. Surf Ninjas. In the early 90s, Hollywood was obsessed with turning every radical teen movie into a video game. Surf Ninjas the movie featured a Game Gear as a central plot device, literally using the handheld to predict the future. Naturally, Sega had to release a tie-in game. And did you know that one of the actors from Surf Ninjas was also in the second Turtles film? I didn't know. I know now. Based on the film, you follow brothers Johnny and Adam as they discover they're the heirs to the throne of Patsuan. I probably butchered that. You have to fight through waves of Colonel Chi's soldiers to reclaim your kingdom. Why? Why should you get the throne? Okay, fair enough. Now you can swap between characters, including the brother who uses his Game Gear to give you hints, and the ninja Zatch. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up that manages to make martial arts feel about exciting as filing taxes. And I hate filing my taxes. Yes, we have to do them in Australia, and I hate them. God, I wish sometimes I was back in the UK, because we get that shit done automatically. Surf Ninjas is a masterpiece of apathetic design. It's a game that feels like it was coded during a lunch break by people who had never seen a ninja or a surfboard. The core of the beat 'em up is the impact. When you punch someone, they should react. In Surf Ninjas, the hit direction is a mystery. You swing your sword or throw a punch and the enemy might flicker or disappear, but there's no satisfying feedback. It feels like you're hitting shadows with just, I don't know, you're flailing your arms and hoping for the best. The Game Gear was capable of a decent speed, but Surf Ninjas runs like it's being played through a jar of honey. The frame rate chugs the moment more than 2 enemies appear on the screen. For a game about ninjas being defined by speed and agility, this ain't it. The levels are some of the most repetitive, uninspired corridors in the 8-bit era. You walk to the right, the background repeats every 3 seconds, and you jump over the same poorly placed crates. There's no sense of progression or place, just a blurry mess of brown and grey pixels that make the Game Gear's screen blur even worse than usual. The movie's Game Gear Prophecy mechanic, that does sound cool, is translated into the game as a menu where you can look at hints. Most of the time these are useless or blindingly obvious. It breaks the flow of the action, well, whatever there is, to tell you things you already know, making the game's only unique feature its most annoying one. The soundtrack is also full of short, shrill thwoops that pierce the ears. The sound effects for jumping and attacking are blips and bips, and sounds like a microwave finishing a cycle than a martial arts epic. It's a literal headache in stereo, and while I have to hear that microwave in my house every day because we have to clean the baby stuff, I don't want to hear it in my video game. The game isn't hard because the enemies are smart, it's hard because the controls are unresponsive. You'll try and jump over a pit, and the game won't register the input, and you'll fall to your death. It's the worst kind of difficulty, the kind that makes you feel the hardware is fighting against you. Surf Ninjas on the Game Gear is a cynical cash-in. It took a fun, goofy movie premise and turned it into a joyless technical slog. It exists only because of a product placement deal, and it shows in every flickering sprite and dropped input. It's a reminder just because a game is featured in a movie doesn't mean it deserves a place in your console. Sonic Labyrinth. Yeah, there's gonna be more Sonic games. In the mid-90s, Sega was desperate to keep Sonic on every screen possible, even if it meant stripping away everything that made him popular. And Sonic Labyrinth is a game that famously asks, what if the fastest thing alive couldn't walk? It's a bizarre isometric puzzle platformer that takes the speed out of Sonic and replaces it with some of the most frustrating, sluggish movements in the history of the franchise. Dr. Robotnik sneaks into Sonic's house while he's sleeping and replaces his iconic red shoes with slowed down boots. To get his speed back, he has to navigate a series of pinball-inspired mazes to collect Chaos Emeralds. Let's just step back from this one. So Dr. Robotnik sneaks into Sonic's house while he's sleeping and decides to replace his iconic red shoes. Just shoot him! Just shoot him in the head! And then Sonic done! Crack on, rule the world! And don't give me this, he's not that sort of villain. The guy built a freaking Death Star? He had a Death Star in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. He was clearly open for a bit of genocide and a bit of world domination. I don't think shooting someone in the head is outside of his remit. Ridiculous. And don't come at me and saying this is a child's video game, you're looking far too much into this. I'm not. I'm merely just pointing out something. Now the gameplay itself is an isometric 3D styled tilted view action game, and since you can't run, the only way to quickly move is the spin dash. The goal is to find a key in each level and reach the end before the time runs out. Sonic Labyrinth is a masterpiece of fundamental contradiction. It's a Sonic game that actively punishes you for trying to act like Sonic. Sonic's walking speed in this game is just agonizing. In a series built on the spectacle of speed and momentum, being forced to crawl across a screen is a total betrayal of the player's expectations. It's not just not fast, it's physically painful to watch. The Game Gear's D-pad was never meant for 360-degree isometric movement, so trying to move diagonally on a screen that is already blurry and small is a nightmare. You'll constantly find yourself bumping into walls, sliding off ledges, or missing enemies because the perspective makes it impossible to tell exactly where you are in a 3D space. And so, because walking is slow, you have to spin dash everywhere. However, once you start a spin dash, Sonic becomes a pinball that bounces off every wall with uncontrollable momentum. In levels filled with narrow paths and bottomless pits, the only way to move fast is also the most likely way to kill yourself. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't mechanical loop. And every level just looks exactly the same like the one before it. The checkered floors and basic geometric walls repeat endlessly, making it incredibly easy to get lost in a labyrinth, although I suppose that's what it is on the tin. On the Game Gear's limited colour palette, everything blends into a muddy, vibrating mess that makes your eyes ache after 5 minutes of play. No, it wouldn't be 5 minutes, it'd be 2. I would have already thrown it out the window and hit that old woman. To make the slow movements even more stressful, every level's on a strict time limit. If you spend too much time trying to line up a precise spin dash, you'll simply run out of time and die, okay? It's a game that demands precision but gives you the controls of a shopping cart with 3 broken wheels. And to be fair, just having one broken wheel of a shopping trolley pisses me off, so imagine if it was 3. That'd be frustrating. The bosses are also massive, slow-moving sponges that require you to hit them with the spin dash. But because of the isometric perspective and the clunky controls, these fights aren't tests of skill, they're tests of endurance. You just bounce around the arena hoping to collide with the boss's weak point before you accidentally bounce into a hazard. Sonic Labyrinth is a game that fundamentally hates its own protagonist. It takes the blue blur and turns him into a blue slug, trapping him in a perspective the hardware wasn't built to handle. It's a slow, confusing and visually draining experience that serves as a grim reminder that experimental doesn't always mean good. Mortal Kombat 3. By 1995, the Game Gear was struggling to keep up with the 16-bit powerhouses, and Mortal Kombat 3 was the game that proved some things just can't be shrunk down. While the arcade version was a frantic, digitalized gorefest, the Game Gear port was a lonely, stuttering mess that stripped away the combat until all that was left was K and some flickering sprites. The setup is pretty much the same as the original games. Shao Kahn has invaded Earthrealm, and you've got to fight your way through his warriors to save humanity. The original arcade game had 15 characters. This had 8, and oh my god. I'm looking at the lineup here. Like, I know Sub-Zero's in it. Oh my god. No Liu Kang, no Scorpion, no Noob Saibot, no Johnny Cage. You really need to like the obscure characters if you actually want to play this game. Why? Blech, blech. And Mortal Kombat 3 is a one-on-one fighter that tries to implement the run button and combos of the arcade, but fails because the Game Gear only has 2 buttons. Mortal Kombat 3 is a masterpiece of compromise gone wrong. It's a game that tries to act like a heavyweight champion while weighing about 4 ounces. The Game Gear screams notorious for motion blur, and when you combine that with Mortal Kombat 3's attempt at fast-paced combat, the characters just turn into smears. You don't see a punch coming, you see a grey smudge and then realise half your health bar is gone. It's like fighting in a steam room while wearing someone else's glasses. Mortal Kombat is a 5-button game: high punch, low punch, high kick, low kick, block. The Game Gear has 2 buttons. To perform basic move, you have to use awkward combinations of the D-pad and the start button. Trying to pull off a fatality feels less like a finishing move and just more like you're playing with a stupid calculator. Because the Game Gear had so little memory though, the backgrounds are static, lifeless and incredibly repetitive. The iconic bank or the subway stages are reduced to a few muddy colours. And there's no music during the actual fights, just the sound of 2 wet sponges hitting each other with the occasional crunch of a 4-bit sound effect. It feels less like a tournament for the fate of the world and more like a fight in a haunted library. And the game just doesn't run here, it limps. Every time a projectile like Sector's missile is fired, the game engine visibly gasps for air. The lag between pressing a button and seeing your character move is so long that you have to play the game by predicting the future rather than reacting to the present. And the digitalized look of those arcade characters, which was the series' whole selling point, is lost in translation here. On the Game Gear, the characters look like colourful piles of laundry. The fatalities are so simplified and pixelated, they lose all their shock value, looking more like a glitch in the hardware than a gruesome execution. And the computer doesn't play fair, well of course it doesn't. And because the controls are so unresponsive for the player, the AI just simply reads your inputs. On high difficulties, the computer will counter your move before you've even finished pressing the button. It turns the game from a test of skill into a test of how much frustration you can handle before the batteries die, so probably about 20 minutes. Mortal Kombat 3 on the Game Gear is a ghost of a great game. It pushed the hardware, but it pushed it off a cliff. It's a stripped down, blurry and quiet experience that lacks the soul and the speed of its arcade big brother. It's the ultimate reminder, just because you can put a game to a handheld, doesn't mean you should. Tazmania. While the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo versions of Tazmania were decent, colourful platformers, the Game Gear version felt like a cruel experimentation in claustrophobia. It took a character defined by wild, erratic energy and trapped him in a world where he couldn't move more than 2 inches in front of his face. It's a game that turns exploration into a repetitive cycle of falling into pits you never saw coming. Based on the Looney Tunes cartoon, Taz is on a quest to find the legendary giant Seaberg egg to feed his family. It's a standard side-scroller where Taz can jump and use his iconic tornado spin to defeat enemies and break obstacles. You have to manage a food meter. If Taz doesn't eat enough items scattered through the levels, he starves and loses a life. Tazmania is a masterpiece of visual miscalculation. It fails the most basic requirement of a platformer, letting the player see where they're actually going. The developers made Taz's sprite far too large for the Game Gear's small screen resolution. As a result, the camera is zoomed in so tight that you have almost zero peripheral vision. In a game about jumping across platforms, you're constantly making leaps of faith into the unknown, only to find out, too late, there was a bed of spikes or a bottomless pit just off the screen. Taz's main mechanic, the spin, is practically unusable. When you spin, you move faster, but because the screen can't keep up and your field of view is so small, you inevitably slam into an enemy or fly off a ledge before you can react. The game's signature move is essentially a suicide button. The food meter is a relentless stressor. Instead of being a fun mechanic, it acts like a ticking clock that forces you to rush through the levels. But as we established, rushing in this game leads to instant death because you can't see the hazards. It creates a gameplay loop of hurry up and die, which is as frustrating as it sounds. Taz is also very sluggish when he walks, but the moment he touches a slope, he slides like he's on ice. The jumping physics are floaty and imprecise, making the frequent pixel-perfect platforming sections feel like a game of pure luck rather than skill. The levels as well are repetitive brownish meshes of dirt and stone, and there's very little of the Looney Tunes charm or colour. The enemies are tiny, flickering sprites that often blend into the background, leading to cheap hits that drain your health while you're busy worrying about your hunger meter. Tazmania on the Game Gear is a lesson in bad screen management. It took a character built for speed and chaos and put him in a game where speed is a death sentence. It's a squint-inducing, frustrating slog that replaces fun with cheap deaths, blind jumps, and it's not just a bad port, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the handheld hardware. X-Men, Games Master's Legacy. In the mid-90s, the X-Men were the hottest property on the planet thanks to the legendary animated series. Sega, holding the keys to the kingdom, decided to create a trilogy of exclusive Game Gear titles. Games Master's Legacy was the middle child, the one that tried to be deeper and more ambitious than the first, but ended up tripping over its own cape. It's a game that offers you a dream roster of mutants, but makes the actual part of using them feel like a chore. Based on the Executioner's Song and Upstart's comic arcs, the Legacy virus is killing mutants. The Games Master has the cure, but he's forcing the X-Men to fight through his game to get it. You start with just Cyclops and Storm, but as you beat levels you rescue and unlock Wolverine, Gambit, Rogue, Bishop and Jean Grey, plus a hidden Cable. It's a side-scrolling action platformer where you choose the order of the first 5 stages, culminating in a final showdown against heavy hitters like Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse. Games Master's Legacy is a masterpiece of... It has all the right ingredients, but serves them on a plate made of sandpaper. The coolest part of the X-Men is using the superpowers, well that's what it should be. Here, using your powers drains a mutant power meter. If it runs out, you're stuck with a pathetic short-range punch. This actively punishes you for trying to be a superhero. Even worse, some characters are fundamentally broken. Cyclops, the team leader, is notoriously useless because his optic blasts are weak and hard to aim on a tiny screen. Instead of a fun linear action, the levels are often confusing repetitive mazes. Because the Game Gear screen is so small, you can't actually see where you're going, leading to a hide-and-seek gameplay where you wander aimlessly looking for an exit or a key. It's not an adventure, it's a commute through a poorly lit warehouse. And fighting enemies is a gamble. The hit detection is incredibly loose, and you'll often take damage from an enemy you thought you'd hit, or fall through the edge of a platform that looks solid. In a game with a limited health bar and no mercy invincibility, these technical glitches feel like a personal insult from the Games Master himself. The game is so unbalanced that the only viable way is to pick a character who can fly, like Storm or Rogue, and simply glide over the whole level. This skips the game entirely, but it's often the best way to avoid the frustrating combat and platforming. And when the best way to play this game is to avoid it, you've got a problem, although the way that Rogue flies... Just like Tazmania, the character sprites are large and detailed, which looks nice in screenshots, but they leave almost no room for the player to see incoming threats. Projectiles fly in off-screen constantly, and boss fights feel cramped and claustrophobic. You aren't fighting Magneto, you're fighting the edge of your own monitor. And after struggling through the mental difficulty in defeating Apocalypse, you're rewarded with a single, static image of the X-Men looking mildly tired. No cinematic payoff, no cool animation, just a thanks for playing screen that feels exhausted as the player. X-Men Games Master Legacy is the definition of a limp legacy. It has a great story and massive cast, but the clunky controls and confusing levels turn a mutant masterpiece into a handheld headache. It's a game that fans wanted to love, but eventually realised was just another battery drainer that didn't respect their time or the source material. And finally, Sonic Blast. Yeah, we're finishing on another Sonic game. Released at the very end of the Game Gear's life and even ported to the Master System of Brazil, Sonic Blast attempted a Hail Mary pass. It tried to be the pre-rendered 3D look of Donkey Kong Country to the 8-bit handheld. On paper it was supposed to look like the future, but in reality it looked like a collection of colourful blobs moving through a slideshow. It's the slowest, clunkiest and most visually confusing speed game ever made. Dr. Robotnik is at it again, using 5 Chaos Emeralds to fortify his base. We just forgotten there are 2 more, are we? Sonic and Knuckles have to team up, well, selectively, to stop him. This is the first time we saw 3D style pre-rendered sprites on the Game Gear. Sonic and Knuckles look round and shaded instead of flat and hand-drawn. And each of the characters have their own ability. Sonic can double jump, and Knuckles can glide and climb walls, theoretically opening up the level design. The Sonic Blast is a masterpiece of technical overreach. It sacrificed every single drop of gameplay quality to achieve a visual style that the hardware simply couldn't handle. The Game Gear's processor was just asking of you to end it all trying to animate those 3D sprites. As a result, the game runs at a stuttering, choppy frame rate that makes Sonic feel like he's running through a strobe light. There's no sense of flow, and every jump and spin dash feels like the game is about to crash. The developers were so proud of their pre-rendered Sonic that they made him massive, but it takes up nearly a third of the vertical screen space. Because the Game Gear is a tiny resolution, you can only see about 2 inches in front of Sonic's face. You aren't running through levels, you're bumping into walls and enemies that you literally couldn't see until they were touching you. And speed? Well, this is arguably the slowest Sonic game in existence. Because of the lag and the screen size issues, Sonic moves with the urgency of my child, and that is one tired toddler. Because of the lag and the screen size issues, Sonic just is so slow. If you do try and go fast, you'll immediately hit a spike or a pit. It's a Sonic game where the Sonic part, the momentum, has been completely removed for the sake of looking like a budget Donkey Kong Country. The levels are some of the most generic, confusing environments in the series. And because the sprites are so large, the levels feel like cramped, repetitive hallways. Half the time, the background and the foreground are hard to distinguish, leading to moments where you'll try and jump on a platform only to realise that it's just part of the wallpaper. To get to the Chaos Emeralds, you have to enter a 3D tube level similar to Sonic 2. On the Game Gear's blurry screen, it's a nightmare. The depth perception is non-existent, and the flickering objects make it impossible to tell where the rings are. It's a test of luck and the eye strain rather than skill. And Knuckles' glide and climb should make the game easier, but the collision detection is so poor that he frequently clips through the walls or fails to grab ledges. His glide is actually so slow and covers little distance that it often feels like a descend into a pit button rather than a useful traversal tool. Sonic Blast is a cautionary tale about prioritising graphics over gameplay. It tried to look like a 16-bit powerhouse on 8-bit hardware, but in doing so lost its soul. It's a slow, blurry and frustrating experience that serves as a dismal finale for Sonic on the Game Gear. It's a blast, but in name only. And that's it. Some more terrible Game Gear games. What did you think of this list? Did you play any of these growing up, and if so, let me know if I've got this right. And if there's ones I need to talk about, put them in the comments below. I'll see you all on Monday for another video. You all take care of yourself, have a great weekend. My name's been Danny. Bye bye.